Today on Science and Technology, we have Kevin Thurston. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
Kevin Thurston is the Executive Director of the Metro West STEM Education Network and the Greater Boston Readiness Center, both education outreach organizations sponsored by Framingham State University. He has over 40 years of management experience in large military and industrial organizations, and he assumed his current role at Framingham State in 2007 with the objective of creating a regional collaborative organization bringing together educators, industry leaders, and community advocates to address persistent public education issues with the emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and math. So Kevin, let me start by asking you, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Maine. I was born in Portland and grew up in a small suburb west of Portland, which was a nice little college town. So it was a great environment for a young kid.
So I actually had STEM education as part of your background growing up because it was part of an academic college town.
Yes, it was. I made it part of my activities anyhow. I love to take things apart, put things back together, hopefully. And
so you were just an engineer to begin with?
I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot of interest all the way through in fixing things and finding out how things work.
And did you do a lot of that around the house with your parents?
Yes.
Siblings?
Yes. Actually still do today.
Yeah. So why and how did you decide to go into engineering and business economics?
Well, I was fortunate in that nice little community we talked about to have a couple of engineers in the neighborhood that influenced me, maybe not early on, but certainly at the point in school that I understood that science and math and those things were of interest. And one of them, in fact, was able to provide summer employment for me while I was in college. So they both were a big influence. Both happened to be graduates of Cornell School of Engineering, which is where I ended up going.
Great, which is another reason why mentorship is so important.
Absolutely.
And we'll touch on that later.
Many times.
Many times. And I'll ask you, what made you decide to go into the Navy, of all things, with that background?
Well, I was completing Cornell during the late in the Vietnam era, and having grown up in Maine, at least I'll attribute some of it to that background, felt that national service of any kind was very important. So as a college graduate, you've got to look for a job somewhere, and the Navy seemed like a good logical choice. Plus there's lots of big machines and ships to tinker with in the Navy.
Did you do a lot of that? Did you end up fixing and jury rigging lots of stuff?
Well, as an officer, they keep our hands off the real equipment.
Yeah.
But certainly enjoyed a lot of time on board ship problem solving.
And did you feel that you used a lot of your background in education and just life experience in general in that position in the Navy?
I think we always do.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Navy or any other endeavor. It's you're always working with people and problem solving.
Right. So where are some of the places that you've been to as part of the Navy?
Oh, it's been a great experience in the Navy, because after active duty I also stayed on as a reserve officer, so probably saw more of the world as a reserve officer than when I was actually on active duty. But much of the active duty time was in Southeast Asia, Philippines, Japan, Hong Kong. In the reserves, I had some great tours of duty that took me to Iceland, Sicily, a number of places around the United States.
Wow, that sounds exciting. And now after that you worked for Hewlett-Packard and PerkinElmer as well?
Primarily Hewlett-Packard.
Yeah. And tell us how that was and what were some of your experiences?
Well, after leaving active duty and getting a graduate degree, I looked to Eastern Massachusetts here as a great place to raise a family and get employment. And of course that was during the high-tech boom. When my years with Hewlett-Packard actually started out with digital equipment and followed by Compaq. So that was an evolution in and of itself in that those three companies, of course, are all Hewlett-Packard today.
Right.
But it was an exciting time. It was a time where innovation and technology was just rampant. You never had time to rest or get comfortable because it was always changing. And we saw things go from large mainframe computers all the way to these mobile desktop devices and not even desktop pocket devices that we have today.
Right.
So always a lot of great opportunity and
Right.
And great challenges to again apply
Right.
problem solving.
And did you feel that your time in the Navy helped with that in any way, or is it more of your pre-Navy background in STEM that sort of made you so successful in these organizations?
No, I give the Navy a lot of
Yeah.
credit. As I say, I stayed on as a
Right,
reserve
reserve.
officer, so that was an opportunity to really pursue two careers at once throughout that whole period.
Which gets me to the question of STEM. Why is STEM so important? Tell us your perspective on why STEM.
Well, there's a lot of reasons, but let me start out with a couple and see where the conversation goes. First off, a lot of people feel that this should be STEAM rather than STEM now, and they have good reason to feel that because a large part of STEM, which of course is science, technology, engineering, and math, involves creativity and innovation. And where do you see creativity and innovation? In the arts. So the arts and STEM are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they're very much intertwined. But to get back to your basic question, why STEM and why the excitement around it now, we're in a period in this world with a global economy that requires innovation, requires pushing the envelope, moving the society forward. And the United States has been certainly at the forefront of that for several hundred years now. As we're moving ahead, though, and we're seeing some of the other economies around the world come on and really start to displace us in certain areas, I think it's a cause for concern. We need to keep our industrial base, our innovation, our economy moving at the forefront there. So that's one of the primary reasons. But I think there's a second reason that we often miss as we focus on STEM education, and that is just the general citizenry needs this balanced education to be productive in this complex world today. The issues that face our society require a good understanding of many of these science and technology concepts. In fact, that's been recognized in the second version of the Massachusetts State STEM Plan, in that we've not just exclusively focused on STEM and STEM careers, but we've also understood that every citizen needs a good basic comprehensive understanding of these STEM subject areas.
Oh, that's a good answer. And why do you suppose there's fear around ramping up or changing or reinventing our educational curricula in this country?
Well, that is
That's
a big
a loaded
question.
question, yes, but from your perspective.
Well, we start off from the place that we always know that there's fear, and that's anytime there's change and we're disrupting the status quo, there's always a certain level of fear. But we need to get beyond that, and particularly in the areas of STEM education. These subjects are not easy. These subjects many times bump up against deep-seated religious or other beliefs and challenge what people have known for years.
Right.
So to take that on, to understand, to believe, to rationalize it with whatever your previously held beliefs
Right.
and such are, is important for at least people to go through, or children to go through that process. Where they end up out of the process is, of course, an individual result. But at least let's get the exposure and let's give people, children, the education so
Right.
they can make those decisions intelligently.
But that's interesting that you say that. There's an article I read about how kids are graduating from school, going to college, and trying to take on a science major or a technology major. And then they decide to drop out because they weren't expecting it to be so tough.
It requires a lot of persistence.
Right.
These are not easy subjects, as you suggested.
Right.
And, not that any subject is,
Right.
but certainly as you get into some of the more complex math and science areas, it takes a lot of persistence.
Mhm. And do you think that starting it earlier in the curriculum, in the system, in like elementary school, for example, would be more helpful
I
to
think
sort of ingrain it into a person or a child's makeup?
I think it's absolutely essential. Unfortunately, our elementary schools have often sidestepped a good, strong fundamentals in
Right.
STEM, because in part because the teachers aren't required to come from those disciplines in their own education. We need to. We have natural born scientists in every child, and somehow we beat it out of them by the time they reach junior high school. We need to reinforce that inquisitiveness, that desire to learn, and ensure that they're getting it right even from preschool all the way through.
That's so interesting, and I know that you're a parent of 4 children.
Yes.
So let me ask you the question, how do you create a balance of not having pressure, the pressure of placing or giving your child a strong STEM education with just happiness and overall well-being?
Well, I think certainly love and support of whatever the child's endeavors are is the first fundamental factor in parenting. But I think if you then start to nurture areas where, as I said, that natural inquisitiveness already is present, and you nurture that, they'll find their own way, and they'll do so because of that family base and that love base. They'll do so in a very secure and trusting environment. So at least I hope that's worked. My oldest daughter's a pediatrician now, so I think hopefully she gets some of that.
She certainly enjoyed it.
And is
Right.
passing on some of that advice to her patients.
Right, right, awesome. So what made you decide to take on your current position?
Well, I took an early retirement from Hewlett-Packard with the idea of career change. And after a few months of consulting, which is what got me into PerkinElmer for about a year actually, I decided that wasn't enough of a career change because I was still involved with the business world and technology, information technology systems, and took this opportunity at Framingham State to branch out into education.
So the natural scientist in you wanted to engage in a little bit more STEM.
I'm not sure if it was a natural scientist, but certainly it was an opportunity with Framingham State that was a very welcoming environment, and also brought me back to some roots that I had with education. My mother was a teacher. As I said, I grew up in a town that had a teacher's college in it, teacher preparatory college. So I've always valued education, and short of becoming a teacher myself, this was an opportunity now working with Framingham State to engage not only higher education levels, but also the K-12 school systems in the area.
And that's so interesting. I saw a recent article, I think in the HuffPost, and it's on YouTube. It's about a 4-year-old who wanted to ask a NASA engineer some questions for homework help. It was really nice. They ended up making a video and posting it online to talk about what NASA engineers do and answer his questions. And I think that the internet has served or is serving as a great resource for propagating STEM education of all different kinds, especially through the media.
And we talk about mentoring.
Right.
There's another source of mentoring that previous generations didn't have available.
Have access to, right. Certainly, I went to high school in the Philippines, and I could never have imagined getting online and asking a NASA engineer questions about wind tunnels, for instance.
They're great people.
Yeah.
In fact, we had one of the NASA astronauts at Framingham State last spring, Story Musgrove, and brought a lot of the high school and middle school students to some presentations, and I think they absolutely loved him.
Yeah, we're going to get Jeff Hoffman, who's been in space 5 times, I believe, to come to the Science and Technology Expo here on April 5th to be a keynote speaker, so we're really excited about that.
I'm sure he's going to be just as big a hit as Story was.
Right. So tell us a bit about the scope of the network that you run and all the different components and all the different things you oversee and what it entails.
It certainly changes day to day, so this story may never end.
Yeah, that's good. We
no,
have time.
The whole concept behind these regional STEM networks was to start to engage the various communities within our community that have an interest, usually a very vested interest in STEM education. So the network brings together not only the K-12 school systems, and I really should say pre-K-12 because we reach into early child education as well, and higher education, which of course we're hosted out of, but we also try to bring in the industry partners who are the ultimate customer of the product coming out of these education systems, and other community groups that have a variety of vested interests in STEM education. Groups like chambers of commerce, for instance, and regional employment boards. So it's a fairly diverse group, but the state felt that having a regular dialogue between these sectors was important to moving the whole agenda forward in the state. So there are currently 7 regional networks. Our network here in Metro West, which we brought together in 2007, covers about 45 towns throughout the area, roughly bordered by 128, 495, Route 2, and 95 in the south.
Wow, that's big.
It is, and at any one time there's different towns and different organizations within the network that seem to be more active than others. But hopefully over time everybody has their programs going, and
they'll all be talking to each other.
Is moving the agenda forward.
So it's a nice way to link all the different pockets of STEM activity together into a network.
And that's the key purpose of the network. Rather than actually running programs, it's the linkage. We have quarterly meetings that, without exception, creates another connection or several other connections that people coming to the meeting hadn't anticipated when they came, but went away with something that was going to help move their own local STEM agenda forward.
And from your experience, how many towns do we have currently that have something like a science fair or an expo?
Not as many as we should. Certainly towns are doing different, putting emphasis in different places, but an expo such as you're pulling together here in Wellesley is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of dedication and local support to make that happen. But I will say, though, that of varying degrees, it may not be a big expo that requires that kind of work. It may be more subtle things that are a part of the classroom every day, or a part of the teacher's professional development, and other ways that we're infusing these STEM careers and this interest in STEM education in the students. One very, I think, successful way that we've done that with one of the Metro West programs is a program that we've called LIFT. It's a program for teachers that actually puts teachers in an industry environment during the summer for 6 to 8 weeks, gives them the opportunity to observe some of these STEM careers in action, take that back to their classrooms, and also take their classrooms back to the company during the fall semester after they've had a chance to prepare the students. Now, this doesn't happen just one fall after they happen to have had the externship. This oftentimes, once the relationship with the company is established, will happen year after year after year. So without the work of a large STEM expo, you still get the exposure of many, many children in that STEM environment.
Well, and what kind of benefits has that yielded? What did the teachers in the class and the business, the company, get out of it?
Well, the teachers, without exception, talk about all of the leadership skills and perspectives on industry that they just never had before. So I know they personally feel enriched. I also know from having, in fact, Perkin-Elba is one of the companies that that participates in this program. So I know from personal experience there that the employees at the company really value the opportunity to have the students come in to show them what they do and establish that relationship, as you were saying, either over the internet, where there can be communications after the fact, or with a science project that the student may have even a couple of years later, and being able to access professionals and helping them with their own STEM education.
Wow, that's awesome. So what are your thoughts on the Wellesley Science and Tech Expo?
Well, first let me applaud you for doing it. I mean, this is
I can't take all the credit. There's a team.
there
are many people who
I
are
know
working on this. So
it takes a team.
It takes a village
But
to throw an expo.
You're doing a great job, and you know what I see coming out of this is, first off, I think this, and I'm thinking back over the 70 years or so that I've been involved, this will be the largest effort of any of our Metro West towns since I've been involved. So, so again, thank you for doing that, because I know that it'll touch students beyond
I'm
Wellesley.
sure that'll make the team very proud to hear. So thank you for that.
So that's great. I know with all the professionals that you're bringing together in this concept of mentorship that we were talking about a few minutes ago, some of those professionals are going to have some very direct impact on some of the participants. There's no question about that. And that's the kind of exposure we need. Metro West is fortunate in that our schools are not only amongst the best in the state, but our schools are outscoring some other nations, other countries in some of these STEM standard exams.
You mean in Massachusetts?
Well, Massachusetts
In Metro West,
as a
Massachusetts.
whole, but Metro West schools in Massachusetts are at the head of the pack. So we don't necessarily have a problem here in Metro West with preparation for these careers. What we do have a problem with is stimulating the interest level in students to pursue STEM careers. So that's where these STEM expos, such as you're pulling together, become so important. We know that we've got students that are intelligent enough and prepared enough. We've got to get them interested.
Right.
We've got to get that interest that they lost as a little kid, so inquisitive, back in them as they're a young adult, thinking about careers.
Awesome. Well, that's positive reinforcement and encouragement.
Well, again, anything I can do to help is
And
certainly.
we're very fortunate in Wellesley because we have the Wellesley Education Foundation, who's been very, all the members have been so supportive, and they also support the local schools, the teachers, and they give individual grants for people to delve into all kinds of things, including STEM.
And this is how it all happens. It takes those community groups that have the passion and dedication to make it happen.
Right, that's awesome. That's good to know. And any other thoughts you would like to add? Anything else you'd like to throw in there? Feel free.
Well, it's been a great opportunity to talk about STEM today.
Yeah.
Certainly, we, as I say, may not have our challenges in terms of preparing our students, but we have all kinds of challenges in terms of producing not just STEM career young adults, but good citizens to go into this world to solve the many complex problems that we've got around us today.
And in your perspective and your experience from being a parent and being in the field, where do you see this going? Like, do you see individual fields staying as individual fields, or do you see different fields converging?
You mean in terms of the study fields of discipline?
Right, like engineering. Do you think, like the future prospectus, do you see it combining with digital arts? Or, for example, there are many schools now that are granting undergraduate degrees in digital humanities, because there aren't any more English majors who don't know how to use tech, for instance. So
that's an interesting evolution. Certainly, these fields have always intersected significantly anyhow. There's so much science and math in engineering that to talk about them separately is not possible. But I think, as you suggested, when we think more broadly of the creativity and the innovation and the other skill sets, the writing skill sets, you're going to see more merging there. In fact, that's some of what the Common Core that we're trying to introduce not only in Massachusetts but across the rest of the country attempts to do, is to prepare students for with these critical reading and writing skills that'll be required in all disciplines.
Right. That's good to keep in mind. And how often does the network meet? Like when you have big meetings, like how often do you have those?
We meet once a quarter, and we try to move it around so that either a higher ed institution or a company has a chance to show off what they're doing in STEM, as well as conduct the business of the network. And like I said earlier, most importantly, enable people to connect.
And how has it grown since when you first took up your position there from 2007 to now?
We started with about 20, 25 member organizations, most of which were in education, a couple of companies involved early on. We've got between 75 and 100 organizations. Now, I won't sit here and try to tell you that they're all as active as I'd like them to be, but to just have the connection and the communication and the ability to access talent or whatever we need to access from them is what's most important, I think.
I think it's critical to have the connections.
Yes.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Kevin. This has been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And again, good luck with the Expo.
Thank you. And we'll hope to see you there on April 5th.
Oh, absolutely.
At the high school. And stay tuned for a following video presentation put together by NASA about science, technology, and engineering.
Hello, Lucas and Sunny Hill School. My name's Ted, and I'm an engineer at NASA. Today, we're at NASA Ames Research Center, which is one of 10 research centers that NASA has spread across the United States. This particular research center, Ames Research Center, is near Mountain View, California. So Lucas sent me a few questions, and we're going to head over to the lab to answer them. But along the way, let's check out a couple of things and show you what NASA has to offer. So here at NASA Ames Research Center, we study how airplanes work, we study how rockets work, we study how helicopters work. You can see a few airplanes and helicopters here behind me. These are the actual airplanes that astronauts fly. We also have one of the largest buildings in the world. This is a hangar that we used to keep blimps in a long time ago. So it's pretty fun to get to see all these different things here. So one of the ways we study airplanes here at NASA is we use things called wind tunnels. Wind tunnels are big or small buildings where we use fans to blow air over models of airplanes. That way we can see how the airplane's really going to work without flying it and risking a pilot. Here at NASA Ames Research Center, we have the largest wind tunnel in the world. At this wind tunnel, we can put full-size airplanes in. You can see behind me, this is the entrance to the wind tunnel. All the air gets sucked in through here. It's also a really good place to play hockey. So that was our quick tour here at NASA Ames. Now we'll go ahead to my lab and I'll try and answer a few of your questions. So before we get to your questions, Lucas, I mentioned earlier that my job here at NASA is an engineer. As an engineer, what I try and do here at work is figure out ways to make things work. That can be figure out ways to make new things that haven't been made before, like new kinds of airplanes. Which is one of the things we do at NASA. Or figure out how to make older things work better or more safe, like the space shuttle. So the first question you asked, which is a great question, was how many stars are there? You might look up at the sky at night and see a lot of stars, but the truth is that there are a lot more stars than you can even see. There's so many stars, in fact, that it's really hard to imagine how many there really are. So, the way we'll answer this question is by using numbers. Engineers and scientists use numbers to communicate ideas to each other. So we'll start with a number that we all know, which is 10. 10. We think about what things have 10. First thing I think of is I have 10 fingers. I have 10 toes. So 10 things is about that many, which is something that's pretty easy to think about. Now, what happens if we add a 0 to 10? Now we have 100. Now that's quite a few more things. 100 things would be like 100 pence in a pound. That's 100. So, what if we add one more 0? That's 1,000. That's a lot of things. It's hard to imagine how many things that is, so let's go take a short field trip and I'll show you. So here we are on my favorite beach in Santa Cruz, California, United States. What I really like about the beach, other than the waves and all the dogs, is the sand. I don't know if you've ever looked really closely at the sand, but the sand's actually made up of lots of little tiny things. Things like crushed up rock and little crushed up pieces of shell. They're really, really small, and in fact, if you took a spoonful of sand and counted up every little piece in that spoonful, you would get about 1,000. So that gives you an idea of something that has 1,000. 1,000 pieces of sand in a spoonful. Now if you can imagine counting up all the pieces of sand on this entire beach, you'd get a really big number. And then imagine not just this beach, but every beach on the planet, counting every piece of sand. It's something that is too hard to do, but if you can imagine the number you would get a giant number. And that number is about the same number as the number of stars in the universe. We estimate that there are about the same number of stars in the universe as there is every piece of sand on every beach on the planet. So we haven't counted every single star in the universe. That would take a really long time, just like counting up every little piece of sand on all the beaches in the world. But instead, engineers and scientists are really good at estimating really large numbers by using smaller portions of that large thing. For instance, if I want to know how much sand is in my shoe, I don't need to go and count every little grain of sand, because I know that there are about 1,000 pieces of sand in a spoonful. So if I estimated how many spoonfuls of sand were in my shoe, that would give me a rough estimate of how many grains of sand were in my shoe without me having to count every grain of sand. So estimating is a really important thing in science and engineering. So now that we know that if we counted every single grain of sand on every beach in the world and added them all up, that number would be around the same as the number of stars as there are in the universe. Now we know that's really, really huge. And now we can write down the number for that and understand what that number really represents. And here's the number, in fact. It's so big that I can't even fit it on the board. So the next question Lucas asked was, who got second and third place in the race to the moon? Now you probably know that the United States was the first country to land people on the moon, but you might not know that another country, Russia, or then the Soviet Union, was the first to do a lot of things when it came to space. They launched the first satellite into space, they launched the first animal to space, and they also launched the first man and woman to space. Now the United States did land the first people on the moon, and in fact no other country has made it back to the moon. But Russia, or the Soviet Union, did manage to land a rover on the moon, which was a little automated remote control robot that could drive around on the moon. So I guess I would probably give Russia a second place with regards to the race to the moon. And actually very recently, a country called China has also landed a rover on the moon, which has been driving around. And so then China would have third place. The last question that Lucas asked was, did any animals go to the moon? And the answer is no. No animals went to the moon. But animals have really helped us understand the way space works and how well humans can live in space. In fact, one of the first living things to go into space was a Russian dog named Laika. Laika's now very much a space hero, as she was the first living thing to go into space. And in fact, NASA also launched animals into space. The first primate, a chimpanzee named Ham, was launched to space. But none of them made it to the moon. They all orbited around the Earth. However, the animals really helped us understand whether or not it was even possible for humans to live in space. So they really led the way and showed us that it was possible. Oh. Well, thanks for coming along with me today. It was really nice meeting all of you. And Lucas, I hope I helped to answer some of your questions. They were really good questions. As you can see, I really enjoy working here at NASA. It's really a lot of fun being an engineer. You get to play with great toys all day. Most importantly, you get to learn about the world. It wasn't easy though, getting here. I had to work really hard in school. So remember to work hard in school and listen to your teacher. And also remember that it's very important to get along with everybody in your class, because you all work together like you will when you're growing up. You work together to solve problems. So hopefully one of these days in the future, I'll see you all maybe up in space.